Hello and welcome to this week's video tutorial in the iRacing Blancpain GT3 series for virtualracingschool.com. The series heads to Suzuka circuit this time, one of my personal favourites despite being very challenging and requiring good high-speed balance. Again, I've driven a lap in the Audi R8 with race fuel running in default afternoon weather to match the official series. We'll play the lap through first in full before then going into further analysis with VRS. So that was a 1 minute 59.569. Okay, so to start things off, we're on the VRS app on the website. We've got data pack selected here on the left hand side, and we're going to select the Audi data pack. And week 9, Suzuka, we'll choose that, and then we'll click on Learn Track. This will of course load up the video analyzer. I'll just pause that. And to summarize, we have a selectable list of sectors. We've got a speed telemetry trace, a steering trace, brake and throttle trace, and then a summary of driving inputs. So we'll go to sector 1, which is the run from the start finish line to the braking zone for turn 1. Play this through, we'll just slow it down and mute it. Obviously keep the car over to the left hand side in anticipation for the braking zone for turn 1, which is going to be this access road here on the left. You want to be braking just before there. So we'll go to sector 2 so I can better show you that, and we'll jump straight to the moment where I'm hard on the brake. So it's a couple of car lengths before that access road. Otherwise you can use the 50 marker as well. So this is a tricky braking zone. You can't brake too aggressively because you need to start turning in quite soon, and then you're going to hook up with 2 apexes. It's kind of a double apex corner. It opens up in the middle, so you can see I'm off the brakes in the middle of the corner, but then I'm back on the brakes, and then there's a period where I'm kind of playing with the brake and throttle, which is something that I tend to do especially in this car, just to get the balance of the car where I want it to be. So I'm off the brakes now, just allowing the car to run out wide, and then I'm back on the brakes before I reach the edge of the circuit. And the car can get very oversteery here if you're not careful. So it might help you to just brake a little bit earlier and have a little bit less entry speed. So I'm just teasing the car into the apex at this point, hooked up with the apex now, quite a late apex, and then hard on the throttle. I say hard on the throttle, I'm in third gear and there's a bit of a progressive application there, opening the steering up. You'll see throughout this whole sequence I'm playing with the steering, very small steering angle, but I'm just playing with the wheel just to anticipate some oversteer. As we exit, we need to bring the car back over to the right hand side to the approach for turn 3, sector 3, which begins the sequence of high speed S's, which begins at the fastest and then they gradually get tighter. So you can carry a lot of speed into the first one, and you want to turn in quite soon for this one and get hooked up with this curb on the left hand side, just playing with the pedals again on the entry. There's a short period of acceleration in between, and then briefly back on the brakes and playing with the pedals just to get the car where I want it to be, coasting whilst on top of that curb, and then picking up the throttle quite progressively on the exit there, bringing the car sort of over towards the middle of the circuit, not quite, so not fully over to the edge of the circuit there. Go to sector 4, and again teasing the brakes, just bringing the car speed down, teasing the brakes to keep the car nice and tight, and then as the corner opens up, picking up the throttle progressively. So your line through this whole sequence is a compromise. So each corner in its own right is a compromise. So obviously if you carry too much speed into one, you're going to compromise your entry with too tight of an entry into the next one, and so on. So we'll go to sector 5, and again just playing with the pedals on the entry just to bring the speed down, and anticipating some oversteer. The car tends to understeer in the middle of this corner, which is where you want to be hugging the apex right here as you're picking up the throttle gradually and bringing the car over to the right hand side. I do briefly reach full throttle there, but it's not something that you need to do. And then the uphill left-hander is, even though it's so high speed, as it kind of levels out, you lose traction. So you'll see here that I short shift up into 4th gear right there, and then that allows me to get on the throttle a bit harder. So you'll see I get all the way to full throttle now, which is, if I left it in 3rd gear, I'd probably be on throttle slightly later. So it's entirely up to you how you want to treat that. But obviously you can afford to use all of the track on the exit. Just be aware that if you do run a little bit close to this grass, obviously that's not what you want to be doing. So in towards the right-hander of Degner 1 now. We go to sector 6. Now the braking reference for Degner 1 is a little bit tricky. You can use the markers on the left hand side, so just before the 50, but I personally prefer to use a discoloured patch of tarmac, which allows me, so just before there is when you want to be starting to brake, and it's a very, very short apex, very high speed, and you want to be able to keep the car tight on the exit. You don't want to run wide, and that's the case for the second Degner as well. So bleeding off, turning in, lots of speed, missing that curb on the inside. That's quite important. The car will get quite unsettled if you do clip that curb. And then keeping it nice and tight and controlled. So we'll just show you the car positioning there. So don't drop any wheels onto this AstroTurf. The car will also bottom out, which is especially true for Degner 2. So we'll just play that through. Braking zone for this one is, we'll just go to sector 8, is, for me, it's difficult to see, but the curb changes colour slightly. It gets slightly lighter, and I brake just before that point basically. So this is a much shorter, tighter corner, and you're carrying less speed than into Degner 1, so you're going to brake for a shorter period. And so I'm braking hard and then bleeding off and then picking up the throttle at the apex. So we'll just see that. Bleeding off, picking up the throttle as I apex there, and then modulating to allow me to keep a tight line, and a bit of a correction which we can see in the steering trace as well as the video for oversteer there. So obviously in second gear, just trying to put the power down and also trying to keep the car nice and tight on the exit as well. In towards the hairpin, bring the car over to the right hand side from the leftmost side of the circuit. So you want to swing in from a nice wide line whilst flat out, and that will allow you to brake in a straight line under braking without trying to steer too aggressively. So that's quite important. So I've already got the car aimed quite far over to the right hand side at this point before I start braking, and then that allows me to sort of straighten the steering under the brakes. I can't brake too aggressively for the reason that I am still steering slightly, and then I'm bleeding off to allow for the rotation of the car. So if you try to turn in with too much brake pressure, you'll just be working the ABS too much at the front of the car and the car won't rotate. So I'm bleeding off to get the car to rotate. That's very important. I was a little bit too deep this time, a bit too late on the brakes, which is why I missed the apex. But I slowed the car down enough, and I was able to make up a decent amount of time on the exit and not lose out overall too much. So you'll see that cut back nicely, get the car stopped, and then hard on the throttle once you have the traction for the exit. So we'll just go to sector 10 now. This is obviously easily flat out, just keep it nice and tight initially, and then as you reach the gantry here, you just allow the car to wander over to the left hand side before bringing it back in again as you approach Spoon, running alongside this curb here on the right hand side, and then thinking about your braking zone for Spoon, which is going to be after this access road on the right hand side, or just before actually. Let's have a look. Yep, just before. Don't brake after, you'll get into trouble. Now obviously you can brake quite hard initially, but then as you turn in, bleed off and anticipate that the car might want to oversteer. I just had a little bit too much entry speed on this particular occasion, and you'll see as I pick up the throttle that the car is very, very wide at this point, and you'll see that I get a little bit of oversteer. So you'll see a spike in the steering trace. That's a sudden counter steer as I come off that curb. So you've got to be careful with that. Just go back to that again. A little bit of oversteer there, but I kept it calm and measured, didn't panic, and waited for the car to resettle. So we're hooking back up tight against the curb again, and that allows me to pick up the throttle nicely and open up the steering. Bit of a wiggle here for oversteer, and reach full throttle before I get to this curb on the bottom. Another little wiggle on the exit as well. So the Audi is very nicely balanced, but it does demand very, very small steering inputs and small corrections to avoid finding yourself in a really leery slide. So towards 130R now, picking your braking point, which for me is just before the 50 marker. So we'll go to sector 12 for that. Very high speed, so not braking very much at all. And then just timing your throttle application and dropping down a gear for better rotation, I feel works best for me. So we'll just see that. Drop down into 5th. Make sure you hook up with this curb, otherwise the exit will catch you out. It tightens. It's a very short apex. So pick up the throttle at the apex, and then a slight hesitation there as I'm trying to feel for the grip and making sure that I'm able to make it through the rest of it flat out. And then towards the final chicane now, go to sector 13, where we can see that I'm braking a bit too hard, and we can see the car will wiggle under braking there ever so slightly. You can see that in the steering trace. So the rear wheels were trying to lock up and the ABS was engaging at that point, which is why it's important to brake no more than about 80 or 90%, especially to reduce tyre wear in a long race. The other thing is I take 2 attempts to turn in, so in a panic, worrying about overshooting, I turn in a bit too soon and then I compensate, open up the steering and then turn in again. It does result in a good line at the apex though, so I'm using lots of curb here, which is good. A little bit of throttle in between, bring the car to the middle of the circuit here, before then aiming for the left-hander, where you do want to run that curb but not as much. So that's a good amount, so I'm not touching the green concrete there, and then picking up the throttle quite gradually and progressively for the exit, where I do commit to full throttle and stay there, but you can't always get away with that. So we'll just go back a tiny little bit here, just a bit more. So before this curb ends, it's quite abrupt, so you can get some horrible oversteer there, especially in a race where the tyres are a bit more worn. So you don't need to be flat out through the exit, but if you do get your line right, then it is good to do that. So we'll go to the final sector 14, which looks like it's just the end of the run through the right-hander. If it's a qualifying lap, then you'll want to exit the corner over to the right-hand side to shorten the distance. You do compromise some of your speed down the straight though if you do that, so just be aware of that. As ever, you can find qualifying and race setups, telemetry and replays over at virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-to-one tuition with myself and other top drivers from the likes of Coanda Simsport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.